Hey there and welcome back. This time we're going to be taking a look at another productivity method, which is time blocking. So let's get started. What is it? Very simply, it's just assigning a fixed block of time to a task. So you can either do this on a sheet of paper, in a note-taking application, on your calendar, wherever it makes the most sense for you. But basically just picking a certain amount of time to work on a specific task, then writing it down. That's your plan for the day. And then you start working on that task when the time for the block begins, and then you stop working when the block ends. And that's it. The difference, though, is that the task is actually tied to a specific time in the day. It's not just chunks of focused work, one after the other. This time, we're actually creating a plan that we tend to stick to throughout the day. And so while they might seem a bit similar, there are definitely some important differences. With the Pomodoro method, we could just employ that system whenever we needed some way to generate a bit of focus time for ourselves. With time blocking, what we're trying to do is both set up specific times to work on tasks that we might otherwise not get to, and also prevent ourselves from going over that time. Now, like the Pomodoro method, this one is also focused around time management, and it's still a very simple system you can use whenever you feel the need to do so. But the goal is very different. In this one, we're trying to contain the tasks. So one, we actually start working on the things we need to work on. And two, we don't continue working after a certain amount of time that we've specified. So our entire day doesn't just become us trying to work on that one project or on that one activity. You have a schedule made up of time blocks. And then during those time blocks, let's say you set up time to go through your entire inbox. At the start of the block, set up a Pomodoro and work through the entire time block that way. So even though you're working on just that one activity, you're breaking it up into smaller focused chunks. That's just one way you could combine them. If you find yourself struggling to maintain focus for a specific activity that maybe you're not very interested in, then adding the Pomodoro method to that might be actually a very good addition. But basically, time blocking is just that, setting a start time and an end time for the important tasks throughout your day, putting it on a calendar, a sticky note, a notepad, a digital notebook like this one, wherever it makes the most sense for you, and then sticking to it. That's it. So how does it work? And I kind of went over that very briefly, but it is a very simple system. You just choose a task that you want to focus on. You decide on a specific time that is going to be for that block. So 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever makes most sense for you or whatever you can fit into your calendar. And then you only work on that task during that block. You don't extend it. You don't start it ahead of time. And then when the time's up, you just stop working on it regardless of whether you've finished or not. So how do we actually do it? The first thing you want to do is actually block out the big important things in your day first. You don't want to just start creating a bunch of little time blocks throughout your day, because the only thing you're going to end up doing if you try and create time blocks for absolutely everything throughout your days, probably you're going to be very stressed, first of all, because the idea is to help you start important tasks that you might not otherwise get to, and also prevent you from going beyond a certain amount of time that you want to dedicate to that activity. So if you just create a bunch of time blocks that fill up every single minute of your day, you're going to run into problems. So basically just pick around 2 or 3 of the most high value, important things that if you got through today, or if you managed to make progress on, would mean that you had a very productive day, whether in your personal life or in your professional life. So that's why I'm saying don't try to time block every single little thing, like your breaks and all the going to lunch and go to the bathroom and all those things. Just leave that out. Don't need to time block that. The next thing you want to keep in mind is you also want to add some recovery zones. Now, these are just essentially breaks around those big blocks, especially if you're setting up blocks of an hour or more. You want to set up a bit of a buffer zone after those tasks, so you don't jump immediately into the next big block and then you run the risk of burning out. We do want to add a bit of a cushion there and schedule that in. So in a way, this is also kind of what we do in the Pomodoro method, where we have that 5-minute break after each Pomodoro, except this is for a longer time. The next point you want to keep in mind is you want to give these blocks labels with actions, right? It's very easy to just give this the name of the project or the activity, but it's not actually describing what you're supposed to be doing. And so it makes it a lot easier to end up working on the thing without actually working on it. If you're supposed to be, for example, writing a report, and instead of that, you put work on report or do report, you might end up spending most of the block just scrolling around the internet, doing research. So make sure that whatever label you give the task, it makes sense and it's something that's actually going to get you closer to completing it. Next, you want to make sure you try and stick to the schedule as much as you can. Now, that's not always possible. Meetings come up, emergencies come up, things that you need to do just happen throughout the day. And so you're not always going to be able to start on time or end on time. But it's also important to recognize when certain things that come up throughout your block can actually wait a little bit. If you use a system like this consistently, It will help you get into the habit of recognizing when things that come up don't actually need to be attended to in that moment. You can delay them for a little bit and nothing bad is going to happen. Most things are not emergencies, and so delaying those things will probably have basically no consequence. And then the last thing you want to keep in mind is at the end of the day, after you've gone through your entire schedule, you want to just review and adjust it. So you want to make note of where certain blocks that you scheduled were either maybe you gave yourself a little bit too much time or not enough time. And this will also help you develop a better sense for how long certain activities take. And so again, it's a little bit similar to the Pomodoro method where it's around time management and helping us create good habits around focusing around the important things that we need to do, not letting other things distract us as much, and also just developing a better sense for how long things take. So now let me show you just a very simple example here. And again, this could be done in your calendar, on a sticky note, wherever it makes the most sense for you, wherever you're going to be able to see it and keep track of it. But for example, you might start out the day with one of those 2 to 3 important tasks that you want to start on or try to complete throughout the day. Now you'll notice I haven't given these very good descriptions to kind of give you an idea. Obviously, I could put my own tasks in here, but I think you get the point, even if I just put deep work, whatever that might be in your case. Another way that the time blocking system can help you is if you're someone that has, let's say, workaholic tendencies, then maybe scheduling something in like your lunch break, actually putting a start and end time to it, might be a good thing to do. Work with plenty of people that just start their day working, and then whenever they start to feel lightheaded is when they decide to go take a break and go eat lunch. And so that's definitely not a healthy habit to get into. So if you're that type of a person, then maybe scheduling something like that as part of your break would be a good idea. Now, the way I have it set up here is for the entire week. But really, when you first begin, I would recommend you just start with one day at a time and just a handful, just the 2, 3 most important things that you want to work on for that day, and put those in your calendar, in your note-taking system. But the point is that you don't plan too much and you don't plan ahead of time. What you want to do is that at the end of the day, when you do your review of just going and seeing what you've done and actually completed throughout the day, how well were you able to stick to the schedule? Do you need maybe a little bit more time? Was this perhaps too much time and you could cut it down and shift some of these blocks around? Those are the kinds of things that you'll figure out each day, especially as you're starting to use a system like this. And then based on that, build a schedule for the next day. Then you're going to be able to get a much better sense for what a productive day for you would be and what types of activities you're able to complete. So that was just one example, but it really will depend on the type of work you do and what your day looks like. Now, what are the benefits? And I've mentioned those a little bit throughout the video. Some of the main ones that it helps you with are creating a sense of artificial urgency. And this is, again, very similar to how the Pomodoro method works. You know when you're supposed to start working, you know when you're supposed to stop working. And so it does create that artificial urgency to try and get as much done possible during that time block. Next is that it helps prevent perfectionism. So when you have an undefined amount of time to work on something, if you are the kind of person that tends to lean towards perfectionism, you might just fill up a lot of time trying to get everything perfect even before you begin. You'll do research, you'll take notes, you'll watch videos, you'll read the thing, and then you'll start working on the project and perhaps realize that you didn't need to really do all of that. You were preparing for something that was more complex and really the task didn't need it. And so by setting a strict time limit, you're much more likely to skip out on some of those things that eat up time and don't actually get you closer to completing that activity. Next is really important. It's also a benefit with the Pomodoro method, which is that it helps prevent context switching. So by setting up a specific activity for that time block, in the case of Pomodoro, it's just the 25 minutes, and in the case of time blocking, it could be up to 2 hours or more, we are making a plan and a deal with ourselves to only work on that activity for that time. So if something else comes up, we get an email, we get a brilliant idea, we're much more likely to make a note of that and put it aside and continue working on the thing we're supposed to be doing instead of just getting carried away and kind of pulled into different activities that are just going to eat our time and not help us achieve the activity that we really want to complete. Time blocking protects our day from getting completely eaten up by one activity that we thought would take 5 minutes and ends up taking several hours. By setting a hard limit, we prevent those sorts of things from happening, especially with projects where we might be doing something we're not used to doing. It's something that requires us to do a bit of research, prepare, or we don't really have a good sense for the scope of how complex it's going to be. Those are the types of activities where it seems like it's only going to take 5 or 10 minutes and it ends up taking the entire day and you haven't done anything else. And finally, it improves your sense of how long things take. especially that review part, because you can also think about how you felt after each block. Did you feel like you were productive? If yes, then it seems like that's probably a good chunk of time to dedicate to that activity. If you felt that you really didn't get much done, it might make sense to then add a little bit more time to the block the day after. Finally, what are some of the common issues when trying to implement time blocking? Scheduling too much in your day is something I find a lot of people, when they first get into time blocking, tend to do because it seems like it's just going to solve everything. I'm making a plan and I'm going to be really precise about it. I'm going to start my time blocks when I wake up and the first task I do, and then my breaks, and then when I check email, and then when I go to the store, and all the different things you try to put into this perfect plan. The goal is not to turn your life into a series of little Tetris blocks that fit perfectly next to each other without any gaps in between. It's just to carve out specific blocks of time for just a handful of those really important activities that you need to work on, even if it's just a little bit each day. That's really the goal. So it might be better to think of them as like little islands kind of floating in your calendar. They can't get bigger, they can't get smaller. You need to visit them exactly when you're supposed to visit them. But the rest of the time, you can just kind of do whatever. The next biggest issue is around ignoring those breaks. And this is for two reasons. The first one is because you just need to take a break. And two, because it actually gives us a little bit of buffer time in case something comes up and we need to extend that time just a little bit more. I think we've all been in those meetings where it's supposed to take only 15 minutes and it turns into an hour or more and it just wrecks our entire schedule. So by building in these buffer times ourselves, we're trying to prevent that from happening. The next most common issue is around labeling these blocks. So again, it doesn't have to actually start with a verb, but whatever label you give that block, make sure it's very clear what it is you're working on and what you're trying to accomplish. Don't just call it work or deep work like I had in my example. Actually put what it is you're trying to do. Process your inbox, write a report, file your taxes, whatever it is, right? The more specific you can get, the much more likely you are to realize when you are, one, going off course and doing something that you're not supposed to be doing during that time block, and also much more likely to do the thing that you're trying to get done. And finally, refusing to stop when the block ends. Now, I know the instinct is to continue working, especially if you're in the middle of something very enjoyable, or you feel like you're getting it, or you're making a lot of progress. But again, by continuing beyond what you had set out in your plan for that activity, you're much more likely to cause issues for yourself later on in the day. In addition, it's also likely that you're not going to end up taking the breaks that you need to take. So while you might get a little bit more done for that specific activity, you're going to end up more tired and will have difficulties continuing on to the next activity in your day. So it's better just try as much as possible to stick to whatever plan you've got, unless it's an emergency and you just absolutely need to stop or you need to continue. But that's rarely the case, right? And so there we have it. That is time blocking. And as you can see, if we go back to the little chart that I've been using to explain some of these systems, I consider time blocking a little bit more of a thorough approach. With time blocking, you do need to first plan a little bit, at least just for the current day or for the next couple of hours. I also feel that it fits squarely within the time management quadrant. So if you're someone that has issues with different types of time management, starting activities that you should be doing, taking too much time on an activity because you're a perfectionist, or not having a good sense of how long something is going to take, then this is a productivity system that I would highly recommend you try because it's still relatively simple. Again, I'm not giving these any sort of score or rating, but if I had to, I would still highly rate time blocking. Maybe not quite as high as Pomodoro in my particular case, but it's still pretty high because it's very simple to start, very easy to adjust, and it's not part of this complex system where if you didn't do it correctly yesterday, you can't really continue today, or you're going to have some sort of a cleanup session in between to make sure the system just flows smoothly. You can just do it on a day-by-day basis if it works for you. So that's it, and I will see you in the next video.